So good evening, everybody. This is Wayne Kimmel for the 76 Capital Leadership Series, and I'm really excited to be here tonight. We are live like we normally are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. And we have a really special show tonight. I actually have a co-host. My partner, Chad Stenner, will be co-hosting the show tonight, and he'll be interviewing Beth Devine. And you're going to hear a really great story and her whole life story, as well as what she's doing today, empowering and working with young people and exposing them to all the great things around sports. And so I'm really excited for that conversation, and I think you'll really enjoy that. As many of you know, 76 Capital is a venture capital fund that focuses on investing in smart, nice, incredibly passionate entrepreneurs that want to do the next thing in the sports industry, whether that's in the sports betting industry or the esports industry, or just generally in technology. We are looking for the entrepreneurs to get behind who really want to do the next thing. And if you want to find out about us, please reach out to us at any time at 76 Capital on our website and all of our social channels. And tonight, we're going to get into the news and talk about, like we typically do on the show, we talk about what are some of the big things around that are happening within the sports industry. And as I mentioned earlier, there's so many things happening, and you can find out all of our information on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and also subscribe to our newsletter as well as our YouTube channel. So our first story tonight of the night is all about esports and what's happening around that. Our portfolio company, Nerd Street Gamers, has partnered with T1 to put on one of the first Valorant tournaments, and it's going to be broadcast on ESPN. And what's really amazing about this is not only is this brand new game, Valorant, which was released back on June 2nd, and it's become one of the really hottest games in video games today, as well as around esports, is that in this tournament, we've got Team Ninja entered. And what does that mean? That means Ninja. Yes, Tyler Ninja Blevins, one of the top esports players in all of the world, will be playing in this tournament. And it's the T1 Nerd Street Gamers tournament on ESPN. Pretty amazing. Ninja is someone who started and really came onto the scene as a big Fortnite player. And then he became an Apex Legends player. And then now here he is within his first really big tournament. He's playing within Valorant. He's playing at a 76 Capital portfolio company, Nerd Street Gamers and T1 tournament, live on ESPN, and it's a $50,000 prize pool. Pretty awesome for what's happening with Nerd Street. Our second news story of the day is another esports story. This was big news this week. When you think about the fact that Microsoft is actually shutting down Mixer. So Mixer was similar to Twitch as well as YouTube, places where people go and watch others play video games, or you can stream yourself also on these sites. Mixer was a big player. Microsoft spent a ton of money bringing on players like Ninja as one, Shroud and others to be on Mixer exclusively. And now they make this announcement that they're shutting down Mixer and basically moving everything over to Facebook. So now you've got Facebook as one of the big players. You have Twitch, which is owned by Amazon, as one of the big players from a streaming perspective, and YouTube, which everyone knows is owned by Google. So it's amazing to hear this, right? So you've got this esports industry that's really controlled by the big publishers, the Facebooks, the Amazons, as well as the Googles, and us working with all these amazing entrepreneurs who are creating those amazing new companies in esports. So it's an exciting time in gaming, and we'll also have to see what happens. Here's the other thing, Shroud as well as Ninja are free agents now. They don't have to go. They're not going over to Facebook, so they can now decide where they're going to go. So I may have to throw this over to Chad and James and see what they think the odds are. What are the odds? Where's he going? Where's Ninja going to go? Is it going to be YouTube, or is it going to be Twitch, or something else? It could be something else, and that'll be really interesting to see what happens with that. Our next story is about super exciting. I mean, look at this. Baseball's back. Baseball is back. We are going to, the owners unanimously agreed to move forward with the 2020 season. It'll be a 60-game season. Opening day is going to be around July 23rd, 24th, somewhere around that. Spring training is going to start on July 1st, and there will be 10 teams in the playoffs. And the players themselves, they'll play 60 games, which means they'll have about 37% of their full salary. And but baseball's back. Baseball's back. Super exciting. So a lot of really exciting things happening in the sports industry. And of course, you can keep an eye on all the things that are happening within the sports industry around what's next. What are some of the exciting things happening from an innovation perspective. You can follow us on our leadership series every Sunday, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. We have some really exciting things coming up. And now I'd like to turn everything over to my partner, Chad Stender, who is going to co-host tonight's show with Beth Devine. And Chad, welcome to our 76 Capital Leadership Series. I think this is your first appearance. I'm excited to have you on.
This is. You got a rookie here, Wayne. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate you letting me take the reins for a show. But I'm very excited to welcome a friend and someone that has done amazing things in the sports space, Beth Devine, and appreciate you letting us run the 76 Capital Leadership Series. Beth, welcome.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, enjoy the show. I'm excited for this, and I'll be watching.
That's great.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you, Wayne. And again, I'm Chad Stender, Managing Director at 76 Capital for the 76 Capital Leadership Series. Beth, welcome, and it's great to have you and great to see you.
It's really good to be here, Chad. I was so excited when this opportunity came up, and glad we could make it work.
Definitely. And so we were fortunate. I got to meet you a few years ago. We worked together on the task force that was put together by Mayor Kenny. And I'm excited to speak to that and all the work that you've done. You've always given back to the community, to the underserved, the underprivileged. Your work is incredibly needed, specifically at times like these. And I'm looking forward to hearing your story and the work that you're doing right now, specifically around the summer initiative. But to start everything, I want to welcome you again, and would love to start for our audience and our viewers, if you could give everyone your background, where you grew up, and how sports has played an important role in your life. And you're one incredible athlete. It's won many awards, as we were talking about off the camera. And it'd be great to hear about sports and how it's been important to you.
Yeah, I mean, sports has been, I was born right behind three brothers, and I'm the youngest of seven. So I had to learn to keep up real fast. So it started in the driveway, and I was that kid that was trailing everybody down to the park, and I weaseled my way onto a team when I was only about 6 or 7 years old, and they stuck me out in right field with a shirt that went down to my ankles. But yeah, I played pretty much everything coming up. My father was a very good athlete, and so he got us into everything. So I was a basketball player, a softball player, a swimmer. I did tennis. Interestingly, there's my alma mater. I went to Mary Mercy, and I ran into a neighbor who was a teacher coach there, and she said, "Tell your parents to get you a hockey stick and then show up tomorrow for hockey practice." I said, "I've never even seen a hockey stick." And then I was on the hockey team and was starting my sophomore year and that sort of thing. So it's just always been natural to me. I just really love the camaraderie of it. I love being active. I was never one to just go out and run around. We always played a game. Like, we always created a game in the backyards. And I was lucky. I grew up in Delco in the suburbs, and we had the backyards that all linked together. So it was just a part of my life and my makeup. And when I got serious about a sport, I mean, I played everything all the way through high school. But the sport I was serious about was basketball. And I ended up going to Lafayette College there and played for Pat Fisher, who was a legendary coach at Lafayette. I played basketball. And then after a year, the softball coach came calling and said, you're allowed to play two sports if you want. And I said, okay, then let me look into it. So I played softball for 3 years as well, which was great. I mean, I think with too much time on my hands, I might have found other things to do. So I was glad to be engaged in sports up there, and it becomes a part of your makeup. I mean, it always had been part of mine. So it's where my friends come from. It was something I enjoyed with my parents. My mom was a big fan. Like, she came to every one of my basketball games in high school. And so we watched basketball. I'll never forget taking her. She loved AI. I took her down to a game. Our friends at Comcast were able to let my mom come with me, and we sat in the Comcast box, and he dropped 54 points that night. And she went and told our friends that, she got to see AI and they won the game, even though they lost. But she was just so excited. So it's just part of our family. It's what we did, and what we still kind of do.
Right. And I think it's so critical how sports has played that role in your life and the power it's had on you. And we're going to get into, why you want to allow that, to have sports be part of all the kids that you're working with, and how it can be so powerful for them, and really can teach life lessons. So when you were in college, did you have a feeling then that sports was always going to be part of your career once you left? Or talk me through kind of how that came about and how that got you going on your career from there.
I was grabbed early by Kathy Rush and her camp outfit, because I played AAU, and the coach was her kind of director of operations. And so when I graduated, I graduated with a psychology degree, challenging. And so I started looking for a job, and as I put them down as my references, and within like 2 months of looking for a job, they called me and said, "Why don't you just work with us? You've been working for us for 5 years anyway." So I kind of fell into the youth part of it, but I was always a coach, as soon as I got out of college. I still do. I've been coaching at the same little grade school for well over 20 years. There was a hiatus in there when I was traveling for work, but for the most part, I've always been coaching kids, and I just enjoy it. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy breaking down the sport and teaching the skill set, because I always felt that when you're a young person, if you don't have that skill set, it's going to be hard to get serious and get far. And so I always just was interested in that part of it, and just trying to get kids sound in their skill work, but also just like to help them understand how important it is to be accepting of your teammates, and to not, what it means to be a part of a team, and what that can do for you well beyond any athletic field or arena. It's just so important, the gifts that sports bring,
Right.
So I like giving that back.
And then the other piece of the coin, our producer, James Santor, would be so upset if I didn't mention you got your master's from LaSalle. So we got to definitely talk that in, just for James at least. Yeah,
no, for sure. I mean, I honestly think it just had, I mastered in clinical counseling psychology, and I went back for that because I was thinking about, a career as a therapist. And what I realized is it helped me in so many other ways. I mean, just learning how people think and being able to kind of see things from both sides and put yourself in other people's shoes, it just helps to build relationships. And it helps to understand, what people go through. And I think that just helps generally in business. And I've learned sometimes that talk less, listen more. I have to remind myself so I can kind of just absorb what's going on around me, and then try to formulate plans and work through situations. So yes, I am a proud LaSalle grad. I got my master's there. I think it was like 2005 or 6. It was after I had worked at the Philadelphia Big Five.
Got it.
Speaking of, right?
Yeah, great transition. Well, one of your earliest jobs in sports was Future Stars camps, and you were VP there. And if you could talk through what your involvement was, and was that the connection that you had given that actually started while you were at school?
Yeah, so I worked that was Kathy Rush's company, and we actually she was Kathy Rush camps for a certain amount of time, and then she was going into all different things, and so they changed the name over to Future Stars camps, and that was a great experience. I mean, I just learned, I was able to learn every part of the business, and it was a smaller business, so I started working there as, a summer camp counselor. I was a basketball person. That's all I wanted to do was be around the game. And so that was the way to do it. You got to play 4 times a day in between all the drills and sessions with the kids. And then while I was there, we actually transitioned and started the day camps. And that's kind of the picture you see there. Is they've really, AAU kind of changed the way basketball looked in the summer. I'm old enough to have lived through that transition of you used to just go to a couple weeks of camp and all the college scouts would be at those camps. And then they'd take away what they knew and start their recruiting process. Well, now, as we know, that's a year-round process, and AAU really drives that. So I was there for that transition, and we transitioned into summer camps that were day camps, 9 to 3. And now I think they're in like 15 locations. I mean, it really has grown like crazy. But Kathy was just a great mentor to me and really helped me learn the business. And we learned by doing. I mean, she was always open to us kind of taking charge of things and really driving the work. And then we ramped up, and 9,000 kids would come in and out over the course of the summer. So it was a big outfit, but that kept me close to both sports and, youth programming, which I obviously was into.
Right. And then that enabled you to move over to the American Cancer Society, and you helped launch one of the programs that is so well known and well respected, Coaches versus Cancer. If you can talk through that and that amazing undertaking that you helped work with.
Yeah. So when I was hired at the Cancer Society, I was they had a dedicated fundraiser for each county, and I was the fundraiser for Delaware County. But the people in the downtown office said, she's a basketball person, and they were just starting these conversations with Dumph and Phil Martelli to get this thing going. And so at the time I got that call and they said, hey, do you want to help work on this? I was like, oh, yeah, of course I do. So so I've known Dumph hung out with my sisters. He's a Delco guy. And so I've known those, and Phil Martelli and Kathy Rush were like this. So I knew those guys outside of all of this. And it was just such an awesome way to stay connected to basketball, but also, give back to a cause that is just so worthy. And so Coaches versus Cancer, now nationally it existed, but in Philly, it was that's what I helped work on. And that City 6 thing kind of came of that. And we started trying to figure out like what things they could do to get the word out and raise money. And we did some high school initiatives tied to the program. And it was amazing. And the very first breakfast was at Applebee's on City Line Avenue. And Phil tells this story a lot better than I do because I'm sure he builds it up a little bit. But I'll tell you that we all remember that day because when we arrived, the Applebee's team was so awesome to work with, but they didn't serve breakfast. So they had to serve breakfast on just this random Monday. And I can't believe I'm telling you this, but when we got there, the place had been robbed, and their team got there at like 4 a.m, and everyone was locked in the freezer. So we're looking around, like, where's everybody? And they're all in the freezer. So we called the police, and they only got about $200. But the breakfast went off without a hitch. It was packed to the gills, and now it sells out on the palatial floor all these years later. But the commitment of those coaches to that program has been like nothing I've ever seen. And they've raised millions and millions over the years. So it was great to be a part of the early days when those types of things were happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. So you were part of a robbery and launched the breakfast all in the same.
Yeah, exactly.
All in the same morning.
We had a lot of laughs once it was all said and done, and we knew everybody was fine. And it's not like it was hurt, but it was really something else. But that's a story. Of course, that's going to happen to Phil Martelli and his crowd when I don't know if you know him, but he's just a character, and so that's the kind of thing that we just said. Of course,
something
like that happened.
Yeah, we were fortunate to have Phil and Phil Jr. on the leadership series.
Good.
About a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago at this point.
Yeah.
That was a fun interview. I can
only imagine. I'm going to have to go back and watch that one. He's such a character, but he and his family are great. And then the wives launched a basketball, and that was another big hit. And that happens every year. So the Coaches versus Cancer program is huge, and we love it.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of the 76 Capital Leadership Series is we always talk about how you move things forward and really entrepreneurial efforts. And to me, that's what you did while it was a national program. You launched it in Philadelphia, and talk through some of the, the stumbles and trials and tribulations of getting something like that launched, which is, like I said, wildly successful today.
Yeah. And it's funny when you sent over the notes from the conversation, I started looking down the thing and I'm like, wow, I really been involved in a lot of startup stuff, that was just taken from the jump. And I think that, part of it is building relationships and building the alliances that'll help move things forward. And then part of it is, I've been blessed and lucky as these guys were to be working for a cause that is so worthy. I mean, I don't know anybody that hasn't been touched by cancer. I lost my mother to lung cancer. And it's just, having worked for the Cancer Society, the one thing that I will say is all that money goes directly into programming. It's not one of those, you don't have to worry about where your money's going when it goes with the Cancer Society. I've watched volunteers driving people to treatments when they can't get there on their own. I've watched just the programming that comes out of that office. It all goes back into serving people who are impacted by cancer. So it's such a worthy cause. And, every time that group ran into any type of trouble, you just step back, regroup, and keep going. But I think that's the athletes in us, nothing phases us. And I found that in that position and all these things that I've been lucky enough to be a part of over the years, it's really just, you got to be able to bob and weave and keep things moving forward. So I think we had a lot of that, getting that off the ground and some of these other things off the ground.
No, that's great. And I want to reset the table. And again, welcome anyone that's tuning in now with our audience to the 76 Capital Leadership Series. Tonight, we're fortunate to have Beth Devine, currently the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative. Someone I'm fortunate to get to call a friend now, to have worked with you. And really, your work at American Cancer Society led you to working with the same coaches as part of the Big Five. And we can talk about that experience. And we have viewers and audience members from all over. So maybe if you can give a little bit of background on,
sure,
as James just put up, what the Big Five is and your work there.
Yeah. So the Big Five dates back to 1955. It was an informal partnership, kind of a handshake agreement among the athletic directors, because what they realized was Philadelphia had 5 basketball teams, collegiate basketball teams, that were competing for people's time. People were fans of basketball and they would follow all these teams. And so the guys in charge at that point said, well, what if we start doing games at the Palestra and we'll create double headers, and that way someone can go see a Temple game and a Penn game that day, or a St. Joe's game. And so I'm seeing that Villanova is absent, but that was only for a small period of time. They came back. But the Big Five existed forever. And if you ask any person that's into basketball in this area, that is probably at least my age, they're going to remember the Big Five doubleheaders, and they're going to talk about how great it was, and climbing in windows and sneaking in the back door and all the things that people used to do to get into those games. And so over the years, that it really just took a life of its own. It was like a conference within a city that didn't exist anywhere else. And so, colors rang true, and locally everybody went to one of those schools, so the Palestra is just this amazing place. I mean, I worked in the hallway outside of the gym, and there were days where I would just walk in there and sit, and just take it all in, because if you're a basketball person, they talk about arenas in other cities, and I said, you walk in the Palestra once and that's it. That's going to be the place you wish you played. I did actually get to play there. I will say that the TV lights created some challenges with my shooting, but other than that, it's the cathedral. It's a cathedral basketball. So anyway, when I worked for the Big Five, there had been a period of time where the Big Five was not together, and they were doing sort of a half round robin as opposed to the full round robin that they always did. And that was driven, a lot of people blame that on Villanova, but the truth is it was driven by conferences, and everyone had so many only had so many non-conference games. And some schools could commit all those games to the Big Five, and the other schools, their conferences said, no, you get fewer non-conference games, and that became the challenge. But at any rate, it got put back together, and they started doing the full round robin again, and that was when I got that job. They hired me as the associate director to kind of manage all the things that surrounded that series. So we did, the Hall of Fame. We did the Hall of Fame dinner. We did awards nights for both the men's and the women's. And then the thing that we put together that I was really proud of is the triple header. So we actually got all 5 schools plus Drexel into the Palestra on a Saturday in December for 3 games, back to back to back. And it was just, if you like basketball, it was the place to be that day. And we used to laugh. There was one year where I think it was the year that St. Joe's almost went undefeated, and we looked around at the attendance. Like during the day, the attendance was, pretty much 2/3, if not almost all the way. It was more than 2/3 full. And then that night, I mean, you couldn't move in the place. And we said, let's just hope the fire marshal doesn't show up, because I think we might have oversold the joint. But it was just, it's just magic. And when those teams are playing in there and the students are there, it's just an unbelievable place to be. So we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, it's the mecca of sport.
Yeah,
it's really an iconic arena, not just in Philadelphia, but nationally. For anyone that doesn't truly understand what the Palestra is, and you were able to work there and call that your day in, day out. And I think any of us that get to work in sports realize how fortunate that is in that experience.
Yeah, what an office, And like, there's so many characters there, like you had Dan Harrell, who mopped the floor during the games, and he had on his Mummers golden slippers as he did it. And then you had the equipment guy, and they all in this picture, every corner has like little nooks and crannies and offices and locker rooms and stuff. So there was always someone just coming out. A cast of characters ran that building, and it was just an amazing place to call home. I was there for, I think, 4 years.
Right.
And it was great.
And then from the Big Five, that really led you, and you're able to transition along with, at the time, it was Councilman Jim Kenney, now mayor of Philadelphia. But you helped start Philly Girls in Motion, kind of maybe alongside that idea with Councilman Kenney. So what was that like, again, starting something from scratch, running an organization and building something from the ground up?
I think what anybody who starts a nonprofit will tell you is it is a lot more than you bargain for, and you get into it and you can't believe you're doing it. But the truth is, when I met Jim, it was in Fred Schabel's office, and he said, we want to start some basketball programming for girls in the city. And I said, oh, okay. And I had been working I took a hiatus from all the basketball stuff and was working in the corporate sector at that point. And I had just left my corporate job because I was trying to get back into youth programming. And so that's when I met Jim, and he just said, there's such a need for this. Would you run a basketball clinic? We'll just see what happens. And I said, yeah, sure. So I called all the old friends, and, we used to run a Big Five girls clinic, and we would, all 6 teams from the city would come and teach. And so we just set it up the same way. And, we had 200 little girls come out, and all these parents. We did a coach's clinic for the parents, and everyone had the same question. Well, what's next? What's next? What's next? And me being a Delco kid, I was kind of like, well, I don't know. You go to your school and get on your school team and keep practicing, and then all the parents were like, no, there isn't any of that. So I started digging and kind of was like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean? You don't have any programs at your school, or what's your rec center do? And that's when my eyes were open to the disparity between even just 4 miles outside. I mean, I can walk to the city line, and it didn't seem fair. And that was it. I just thought, well, there it is. That's what I'm going to do next. And so Jim said, same thing. He said, well, now that you know, why don't you start something? And so that's where Philly Girls in Motion came from. And we started with some after school programming, and we worked in some rec centers. And then I got a call from a guy who was a principal at a school, and he said, when I tell you we have nothing for the girls, we have nothing for the girls. And so we started into school programs, and then we got a call from the EOM Athletic Center, and they said, we're really struggling. We only have one program for girls, and we came down, started a program there. And it just kind of grew, and just what was mind-blowing was the need. And so that's kind of really where it set me up pretty well for the position that I'm in now, because we work so hard to address the need. Yeah, our volunteers and some of the little girls from the program. So we had rec center programs, and our volunteers were amazing. And they'd come out, and we would do running and Zumba and yoga and all sorts of different classes for the kids. And then every year we had this race called Sea Chicks Run on Forbidden Drive. And so there's a lot of pictures from that. But it was, it's one of those things where you kind of remember it as getting caught up in a swirl, of just all of a sudden you were starting an organization and running it and building a board and raising money and all that stuff. And I worked for most of that time. And then I took the leap in 2014 was when I left my job to do Philly Girls full time and just try to grow the budget and grow into some new spaces. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that.
Right. But that's the point to me, that it really showed you the power of sports and what that does for in this case, young girls that you were working with, and the need. And that really kind of brings us to PYSC. But what were the lessons that you saw firsthand, and why kids need sports, and what happens when they have it or when they don't have it, and when they don't have the access to it?
I met so many girls in that program. In the whole first year, I was running a lot of the program myself. I was going out and running kids around the block and teaching classes and doing all this stuff. And you really get to know the kids. And I just, when you ask them why they'd show up every week, it was just like, well, my friends are here and we get to play and we get to do this and we get to do that. And I just thought, like, it just lights fire in you that said more kids need to be moving, more kids need to be active and engaged with their friends. And it doesn't matter, rich, poor, whatever, like, kids need each other. They need their friends. They need good mentors. They need people that care about them and ask them questions. They need coaches. And this was an ability, this gave me the ability to provide all that. And it just made sense. I can't explain why the drive was there to do that thing, but I'm so glad it was, because there were days where I was just like, what have I gotten myself into? Like, this is a lot. But then you'd go to, I always said, when in doubt, go to a program. That was my internal thing. Go to a program and talk to kids and just see what they're enjoying. But I'm thinking about the girls down at the St. Thomas Aquinas. It's a little school in South Philly. It's 17th of Mars. And those kids really were so, we had some really good coaches that we brought in there to work with the kids. There was a local CrossFit outfit that would bring their coaches in, and they'd run the kids through all these different things. And coaches come in, and then we had all these, people that would come in and instruct on Zumba and all that. And the girls were just like itching for that relationship. They just wanted that. They couldn't wait for that teacher to show up, and they couldn't wait for these coaches to show up. And it just gave them something. It gave them joy, it gave them joy for 45 minutes to an hour. And then we would do, some curriculum and learn a little bit more about them, and the teachers were involved. So it just builds this camaraderie that you don't see in other activities all the time. I think the nature of sport nurtures that because of the relationships involved. You have your teammates. If you're doing, challenges, you have people there that have your back and are rooting for you and working to get you through it. So I just think it's so naturally set up to build that, those relationships, which in turn builds confidence for kids,
Right.
Girls and boys.
Definitely. And again, I want to thank Beth Devine for joining us on the 76 Capital Leadership Series, which we run every Wednesday and Sunday night at 7 Eastern. On LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And all the shows are live. And then we also have them on our 76 Capital YouTube channel as well, to, like you said, with the Martellis, go back and watch any of our old leadership series. So moving into today, and like I said, how we were able to work together was part of Mayor Kenny's Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative, and really an organization that I would say, relaunched or in 2016, and correct me if I'm misspeaking about any of this, but you were part of Mayor Kenny's transition team.
Mm-hmm.
And really, what's your relationship with Mayor Kenny and how this came about and the need for it, and really how you got going with what we say PYSC?
Yeah, so I would say that the organization and that relationship are parallel, but they crisscrossed where it was really instrumental in helping us to launch some things. So, as you know, I met Mayor Kenny when I was doing that basketball clinic, and then that turned into starting Philly Girls in Motion. And at the same time, there was a group of nonprofits in Philadelphia that did sports-based youth development. And sports-based youth development really is using sports as a hook to get kids into quality extras, right? The extra programming, the mentorship, and the leadership training, and nutritional education, and academic tutoring, and all the things that come with, trained good mentors and coaches and people who put these programs together. It just differs a little bit from traditional youth sport. It doesn't look like the sports I grew up with, because the sport itself is just the hook. And then once the kids are there, people are trained to kind of provide a little bit more. And but again, leaning on the things that are naturally inherent in sport, the things that make sports fun and make sports engaging for youth. So at the same time, the Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative was started by a group of nonprofit leaders who kept seeing each other out at, nonprofit support services, so capacity building things. And they realized that there's a really robust community of nonprofits in Philadelphia that do sport for development. And so they got together and put together the collaborative. And for a while, it was hosted at the University of Pennsylvania in the Out of School Time Resource Center. A woman by the name of Nancy Peter was headed it up, and she did a wonderful job building it out. And also a woman by the name of Wendy Palmer, who was a volunteer and just kind of helped drive the activities. So they did monthly panels, and they came together on some different things. They helped start the ASAP directory, which is a directory of after-school services. They created a program called Sports for Juvenile Justice, which engaged youth that were maybe first-time offenders and in the system. They got them into some of the providers that were in this network. And then, this group, and it's great that you have the Horners up there, because they were instrumental in this next stage. So in about 2014 or 15, the Out of School Time Resource Center was actually gonna move their operations outside of Penn. And at that point, the leaders within the collaborative said, we think this can be more. We think we can really be a driver of system building in Philadelphia to make sure that more and more kids get access to better and to quality programming that uses sport to support kids as their development. And so the Horners, who are in the center here of this photo, are this wonderful couple who have a foundation, and they made a major investment in the work of the collaborative. So they funded the launch of kind of what we jokingly call PYSC 2.0. And at that point, that's when I was hired to be the executive director. So, it was a huge gift that really launched the work. And what I know as a nonprofit leader, if you have an investor in the beginning, you can do so much, because you're not constantly out, $5 and $10 and $20 your donors. You have a little space to say, what's the work? How are we attacking that work? What's our growth plan? What's our growth strategy? And you guys know that drill, right? Because that's what you do is make those investments. So having that investment and an amazing board that believed in the work. I mean, the board was so strong from day one. It included two of the member organization leaders, Kenny Holtzman from Philadelphia Youth Basketball and Steve Gregg from Squash Smarts. And then this just amazing committed group of people who said, yes, this work is worth it. And so we were able to really put the work in place and commit to it over the first couple of years of existing in this iteration. And now we are, when I say running at light speed, I've never been fast. That was something all my coaches always complained about, but I feel faster than I've ever been now, because we're just really, there's so much to do and there's so much opportunity in this space. And that goes back to that first realization of, what do you mean you don't have this? Like, why? So we're addressing that why in a lot of different ways.
Right. And talk through the task force that came together. Like I said, Mayor Kenny really had the guidance for bringing it together. And the chair of the task force was David Montgomery, who was chairman of the Phillies, minority owner. Unfortunately, he passed away from cancer a year ago. But talk about your relationship with Mr. Montgomery and how he became the chair of that task force.
Sure. Yeah. So the task force was an effort for us to really bring together leaders from across the city to help everyone understand that this was a problem that should be addressed. That kids didn't have equal access to quality sports programming because it was like pay to play or nothing, or driven by nonprofits. There's no like in between. And so we just wanted to study what those barriers and challenges were so that we could create a plan, an actionable plan to address them in the city of Philadelphia. And Dave was a very good friend of one of our board members, and we knew he had his plate full because he never said no, and he engaged in so many different charities and worked so hard. And then, oh, by the way, he was also, leading the Phillies. So we took a shot and talked to him in the living room of one of my board members and just said, we're really wanting to address the issues that exist here and why things don't look like they do in the burbs. Like, why isn't every kid having access to quality programming? And he didn't hesitate. I mean, he listened, asked a bunch of questions, and then just said, I'd be happy to chair that. And he's like, he said, I'd like to co-chair it. We said, no problem. So, we already had a couple others in mind that we did want co-chairs because we thought it was important to engage city government. We thought it was important to engage the school district. And at the time, so Mike DeBerdinis was a co-chair, and he was the city managing director at the time. And then we had Otis Hackney, who is he was a chief education officer for the city. So we really had a perfect group of people to help lead that charge. But when I think about Dave and how he approached this, I'm always humbled by the amount of time he gave us when he was not only, doing all the other activities that he was engaged in, but also he was sick. At one time we had a meeting across from Jefferson because he came to that meeting right from a treatment. And he still, had so much time to commit because he felt that this was important. He knew all kids should play. All kids should get to play, and they should get to play in programs that care about them as a young individual. And so I'll say it. I knew him for 2 years, and when he passed, it was devastating to me. And I just think, how did the Phillies get through that? He had been there for so long, but what a unique individual. He was extraordinary. And I will never meet anybody like him. I remember calling him, and he was in the ballpark down in Florida for spring training. And I could hear the action going on behind him, but he still took the call, and he spent 20 minutes on the phone with me. And it's getting a little loud here. I'll call you back. And like clockwork, he'd call you back when he got to a quiet place. I thought he must have been on his phone all the time because I was this small part, in his role here. And so I have, I went to his memorial service, and they gave you a wristband, and I hang that in my office, and it's just kind of like motivation. What would Dave do? I'm so blessed to have had that time. But the result of the task force was, we published a report. We launched that report to the city with Mayor Kenny, and it had actionable recommendations. And then our job was to start acting on those recommendations. And we immediately set out to build relationships with city agencies to find out what are the opportunities within your agencies to make sure that kids have better access, and how do we build things to help that? How do we build things within the school district? The school district had its challenges over the years with reduced budgets, but because of the task force, the school district committed to creating an intramural program that would reach their K-5 kids. And so all these conversations came out of that work. And so we were really had a perfect storm of people that said, this is important. We're going to commit our time to it. And then we're going to commit to making sure that these recommendations get carried out. A lot of times you have a task force and they put out recommendations, and then everyone looks at everybody and says, well, who's going to do that? And what was unique about this is we're a backbone organization. That's our job. Our job is to make sure those things get carried out. And so we were perfectly positioned to drive the work.
Yeah, no, Beth, the work that you do, the executive director for the Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative, I mean, you truly are a leader. And as we were saying, Mr. Montgomery embodied leadership. We're lucky to have you and to have you talk about that experience on the 76 Capital Leadership Series. The work that you've done has always been critical for the city of Philadelphia, for the youth. I joining the task force, it was incredible to hear the true need, the lack of resources that are out there, and the work that you've done leading up to this. And then now, given the pandemic and COVID, there's even less resources, less opportunity. It's gotten even harder. We've talked a few times during the pandemic, and to hear firsthand what you're going through and what PYSC is dealing with. And if you can bring us to speed and let people know in our audience how they can help, how they can be involved, and what they can do to give back to Philadelphia, they can do similar in communities outside of the city of Philadelphia.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like all nonprofits that are in service to others, the pandemic has just closed that off. You don't have access to your people anymore, and that's really challenging. And where we feel that this is going to impact our youth is that, the youth that we have 50 nonprofit organizations, the youth that they serve are already at a disadvantage in so many ways, because they might come from neighborhoods of poverty, or they might be in underserved schools, or there's already a disparity there. And the gap, those kids have trauma in their lives already. Now they've been quarantined, potentially in spaces that are dangerous, that are unsupervised, that maybe are in unsafe neighborhoods. And they don't have their people. They don't have their coaches. They don't have their teachers. They don't have their teammates, their classmates. And so cutting off those services because of the pandemic is really going to drive a spike in mental health challenges, physical health challenges for these youths. Now, our members have done an amazing job immediately getting in contact with their kids, reaching out, going through their coaches to connect to kids, to make sure that the kids are well and cared for and have what they need. I mean, so many of our members were delivering food and checking in and doing nightly calls with their coaches and all this stuff. So our community, I am so proud of the work that I've watched over the past couple of months. And then we looked at it, we're a capacity builder. So we kind of jumped into the space of, well, what do our members need now? And we're kind of like a chamber of commerce for that group, so we provide services over the course of the year that help them run a better organization. So we went into, how do you communicate through this? What are your leadership styles looking like through this? What are the things your board should be thinking about through this? But our programmatic work, we do some large programmatic work with our members. All was completely stopped, and we just thought, what do we do, right? How do we address this? And what role we're an intermediary, what's that role right now? And so, we figured out a way to continue programming that we could continue. And we started talking to our partners. We know that budget cuts are coming for Parks and Rec. We know that the school district's going to take a huge hit. We know that the Office of Children and Families, while they've maintained their funding, so they'll be able to continue to serve their families, we knew they were going to have some challenges. And so we reached out and we figured out, okay, the school district's closed, so we're going to have to just, wait on them and see how the fall's going to look. And we'll advocate for our members to be able to work with students as best they can within the parameters and guidelines. But the opportunity that arose was with the Office of Children and Families. They were still working. They worked through, I want to say 90 some odd providers to reach kids in the out of school time space. And they were trying to figure out summer, what happens. And so what they realized it was most of those summer camp providers were now going to be virtual. And so we said, well, what are you going to do for sports and physical activity? And they said, well, what do you think we should do? So we started talking and the idea was raised of, can we do some virtual programming that those providers could use with their students in a virtual summer camp setting? And as that conversation got rolling, we started saying, well, kids are going to need stuff to play with. And so that was it. It took off. And so we started talking about, well, what could we provide and what would that cost and what are the budgets and what can we do to make sure that kids have some things to play with and then have some activities to do with those things. And then what are the resources the providers are going to need as they reach out to kids this summer. And the same with Parks and Rec. They were before camp was allowed to happen, they were leaning very heavily on their Play Streets initiative, which has been around for 50 years. But they just said more kids are going to be at Play Streets because they're not going to have camps. Now, the good news is they will have camps, but they'll be very different and they won't be able to accommodate as many kids. So Play Streets are going to be busy as well. So we put together three things. One is equipment kits. We are going to raise the funds to get as much sporting equipment into the hands of Philadelphia's kids as we can. We are pulling the trigger on the first 2,000 units to get a basketball, a soccer ball, a jump rope, a strength band, and another play ball to at least 2,000 kids. And there's 7,500 kids just in the DHS system alone. So we know we have to raise that bar. Then the second piece is the online piece. So we're creating a mobile app that'll be launched sometime this summer. In the meantime, we're going to be able to connect the providers to about 90 hours worth of programming that our member organizations are providing. So they're going to, they're doing lessons with a warm up, an activity and a cool down, and we'll house them on a YouTube channel that the Office of Children and Families providers can access and run through with their kids. And then the third space is coaching. So we've been talking about where can coaches fit in this process because kids need their coaches. And so we found that some of these providers are doing in-person camp, and we're going to match up member organization coaches with these activities, following the protocols to go out and just do some safe sporting activity within the confines of those camps. And then we're also creating a resource so that Play Streets leaders can reach out to members of our community and say, hey, can you send a coach down to this camp or to this Play Street and do some activities? So the whole initiative is called Game On Philly. We've been internally joking around about what is it, camp in a box, but those three components are the things that we're really trying to make happen for as many kids as possible. So we're still raising money to get the equipment kits and get that number up. We're still raising money to do the coaching pool. And then the online app is underway. It's in development. That's not a 2-day turnaround, but so we're going to slowly roll that out over the course of the summer. But so our team is busier than ever. A lot of people said, like, what are you guys going to do during this shutdown? And I said, oh, don't worry about us. We're gonna figure it out. So the goal is let's reach as many kids as possible and in a healthy, quality way that'll give them a summer that's not a total downer because the pools are closed and they couldn't get into camp. We want to give them some fun, and that's what summer's about. So we're hoping that this will do it.
Yeah, no, the work that you do is incredible. Truly give back to the community. And if our viewers are interested, they can go to pysc.org. If they're interested in donating, pysc.org/donate. And Beth, what are the other ways that people can get involved and can participate?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking to a lot of corporations and foundations to just see how we can support getting equipment into more kids' hands. So if there's opportunities there, I mean, we don't have the time or the capacity to do like an equipment drive. So we're really just making sure kids get brand new equipment. And so the way to do that is to make bulk buys, and we need the funding to make those purchases and get it right. So, if corporations want to get involved and sponsor the initiative, we have opportunities there. And we're just hoping that people will jump on. And then the other thing is we're going to definitely have a number of distribution days. So we'll need volunteers. We'll make sure all the protocols are being followed so that we bring people to a space that's safe. And and the distribution will happen through the providers. So it's not like that 10,000 kids are going to come to get their equipment. We're going to make sure we get it into the hands of people that serve those youth, and then they'll make sure that gets distributed into the youth's hands.
Yes, and as we were discussing with the equipment, equality is critical. And so that's the reason you can't kind of collect ones and twos.
Yeah.
You have to provide the same to everyone. But I want to say, definitely count the 76 Capital team in for the volunteering and
Awesome.
for the equipment handout. Would love to participate and give back. We have a few minutes, so before we wrap, I'm curious, what are your goals overall for PYSC, for yourself in your career, and what do you think's next for you and for the organization?
Our goal as an organization is every kid should have access. And it doesn't mean they're all going to take you up on it, but there should be quality sports-based youth development in every school and every neighborhood. And that's been our goal since day one. And so, we've built the partnerships, and we've built the alliances that I think can get us there, where schools will have an option for every kid. And it shouldn't matter, where a child comes from. There needs to be equity in all of this. And that's what we see. We see that there's a real inequity in access, and a real inequity in the number one driver of kids not playing a sport is money. It's household income is the one thing that's tied to it. So, that shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter if where I was born or where I grew up. I should be able to go play. And so I think the short-term, long-term, and everything goal is every kid should have access, and it should be a good quality experience, not just somebody rolling the balls out and making sure nobody gets hurt. So that's the goal. And as far as me professionally, this job has been a dream come true for me. I worked a lot of jobs over the years, and I had some amazing experiences. The Big Five was just unbelievable, and working for the Cancer Society. And I've had some other stops along the way, but this job brought it all together. I feel like, honestly, there were things that I went through at different positions that I had that I thought, like, what am I ever going to do with this? But this job has allowed me to reach into that toolbox and really do a lot. And it's also helped me learn about myself, like this, what a dream position, because I was always called to give back and called to kind of return the favor that sports gave me. And what a position, like it just allows me to do that every day. You can't wake up and wonder what's next when you have this in front of you, and we're not done yet. So, the hope is that I can just continue to drive the organization into a place of success where we can be sustainable long-term, and to just continue, the best is we get driven out of business because there's access everywhere, but we want to be a national model. And I think that that's important. Like the work in Philly we are one of the leaders in the country in this work. And so we want to make sure that people see us as a resource, and we can build some things here that can help other cities and other places to do like work and to get their kids engaged and cared for,
Definitely. No, thank you again. Before we wrap up tonight's 76 Capital Leadership Series, I want to preview the next show, which is going to be this Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. We have Reggie Love, who was the former personal aide to President Obama. He Duke grad. He played two sports, football and basketball at Duke. He was part of the 01 National Championship at Duke. It's going to be a fun show. We'll have Wayne back, so I'm excited to let Wayne run this. But again, I wanted to say an extra big thanks to Beth Devine, Executive Director of Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative. And we truly appreciate you coming on tonight, sharing your story. And again, everyone can go to pysc.org to find out more about your organization. So Beth, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Game on, Philly. We're ready to go. But I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about that tonight and to talk about all of this with a friend. So thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you to all of our viewers and audience out there. Have a good night.
Good night.